Hello again, everybody. This is John with BestPriceNutrition.com. Today I'm here to answer the question as to whether or not you have a fast or slow metabolism. I've mentioned it before in a couple other videos, and once in a while I get a comment that says, no, fast metabolism, slow metabolism, what? What are you talking about? Stuff like that. So today I am going to clear that up for you. We're going to go pretty in depth, so please stay with me on this one because there's going to be a lot of good information, what I hope is good information at least. But if you stay with me, I think it'll be rewarding. I promise at the end I'll recap the bullet points and things like that. So, I put it in a manner that you can hopefully grasp it and get something out of it. So without further ado, I'm going to go to the whiteboard actually. Now, sorry, I just forgot. So I'm going to switch over to the whiteboard so you guys can see it. Okay, guys, as promised, I'm back over here at the whiteboard covering fast for slow metabolisms. Do they exist? Stick with me and we're going to cover it because it's not as a super simple answer. So, but I'm going to try and simplify it for you. Number one is we're talking about otherwise healthy individuals. We're not talking about a sick population here. So let's get that out of the way. So if somebody in the comments puts, well, what about this? What about that? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about healthy individuals. You're not cursed by a fast or slow metabolism, and I'm going to tell you why you're not cursed. On the board you see a bunch of writing here. We're going to go through it, so please stay with me. There's no magic going on here, okay? When you take in calories, they're either burned or stored. Don't let charlatans out there convince you otherwise, making stuff up, telling you that the laws of thermodynamics do not apply to biological entities. We do obey them, okay? But there's some nuance here, and there's some variables. So I want to go through those with you guys. So over here I have this chart. Over here I have calories burned per day. As an example, and you see some acronyms here. We're going to go through each one, and these are the factors that make up your total energy expenditure, the total amount of calories you burn, and what contribution they make to this equation, okay? Below you see them here, BMR/RMR plus TAF plus NEAT plus TEA equals TEE. Let's go through what those mean. BMR/RMR, okay? It's basal metabolic rate or resting metabolic rate. Yes, they are different. There's about a 10% difference between the two, but for our purposes, we're going to use them interchangeably. The difference, for those of you that are interested, BMR, your basal metabolic rate, is measured after 8 hours of sleep and a 12-hour fast in a dark room. Your resting metabolic rate, the criteria is not quite as stringent. It's basically all the energy you burn at rest. The biggest contributor to that is your fat-free mass. Your heart, your liver, your eyes. These organs require a lot of energy at rest. It's not as if your heart stops beating, you stop breathing, your liver stops working when you're not doing something. They're always working, and they require energy. It's metabolically expensive to be a human being, so to speak. We maintain a constant body temperature. There's a cost to that. Another factor that plays a role is body composition. Okay, in other words, how much fat do you have, how much muscle do you have, things like that. We'll get into that a little bit later. I have some notes over here that I can cover that on that, I'll explain where those variables can come in. But BMR, RMR, for the most part, there's not much variation between two individuals that weigh about the same, okay? For the most part. Next, we have TEF, which is the thermic effect of food. In other words, what's the cost of eating? That would be, what does it take when your body's extracting the energy out of a food? You have protein, carbohydrates, and fat. Protein has a higher TEF than both carbohydrates and fat. We know there's about 4 calories per gram of protein. And depending upon source, you're probably only going to realize about 3 of those calories to be used for energy to build structures, okay? One of those calories is actually getting burned during the process of extracting that energy. Next on the list would be carbohydrates. There's a thermic effect there, probably about 5%, give or take, and then followed by fat being the lowest. Unless we're talking about an exception like medium chain triglycerides that are, they're actually metabolized differently, they're sent off to the liver. But for the most part, TEF doesn't make a huge dent into our total energy expenditure, okay? But we will go into some of how the macro differences can have an effect. And the more food you eat, I should mention, the more calories you take in, well, of course, the higher the thermic effect is going to be. You're eating more. Next, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, okay? This is the big one. This is one we're going to focus on a lot because this is the one that can vary a lot from person to person. This is the kind of activities you do, such as walking. Me standing here versus sitting, I'm burning more calories by standing than if I was sitting. So those of you with desk jobs versus those of you who stand, that's why I have, the type of work you do, that's going to play a role in how much energy you burn. Somebody who sits in an office for 8 hours versus a construction worker who's out, moving throughout the day. Well, that's going to lead to more non-exercise activity thermogenesis for the construction worker. Things like chewing, fidgeting, people who constantly are moving and stuff like that, that's all non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And for instance, there's a lot of variance within walking. If you walk at 1 mile per hour versus 3, you're the faster walker, that can make a great difference, as much as 20% difference in your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, depending upon how much you're doing, of course. But the difference, 20% being between that 1 mile an hour and 3 miles per hour. So, I'm somebody who walks really fast, for instance. I'm getting grabbed, hey, slow down. I have to mark time to get back to, whoever I'm walking with. So, some people walk faster, so that plays a role in that. So, there's a lot of variance here with non-exercise activity thermogenesis. We're going to go into that a little bit more in depth here in a second. And then next at the top, and by the way, guys, this is a bar graph, okay? I hope that it looks that. I'm a terrible drawer and writer. Next is T. Anybody T? No. Thermic effect of activity or exercise. This is you working out, running, doing things like that, okay? This is very much so within your control, how much of it you do. Interestingly, how much exercise you do plays a role in how much non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Why? Well, think about it. If you exercise more and you're just say you're on lower calories, you're probably not going to be as motivated to walk as fast or move as much. You might get a little bit sluggish. So that's when some of these things can vary a little bit, just as an example. So sometimes when people are on really low calories and they're exercising a lot, they lay around more. And that's to be expected. And yeah, so that pretty much hopefully covers this. Now back to here, BMR, RMR, plus TEF, thermic effect of food, plus NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, plus thermic effect of activity or exercise equals TE, which is our total energy expenditure. This is how much energy we're expending. Now, we have this level here. Now, the other thing that's in our control is if I were to draw something over here, I ran out of room, and again, I'm not a good drawer, how many calories we take in, where do we fall? If somebody is burning up here, I'm going to mark this as 3,500, just for an example. That's supposed to be a 3, by the way. I don't. It's like not quite a 3. Anyways, so let's just say we're burning 3,500 calories a day, but our maintenance level of calories is in here. Just for us to do our thing here, it's like 2,900. Let's just say. If we're taking in 2,800, we'd call that a caloric deficit of 100 calories. If we're taking in 3,100, that'd be a caloric surplus of 200 calories. More variance there, guys. Remember I mentioned non-exercise activity thermogenesis? Well, as people increase their caloric intake, they tend to move more and do more. If they lower it, like I talked about, they tend to move less and do less. So there's some variance there. So that's why there's not this one magic number of maintenance calories. Let's just say for me that maintenance number is 3,000 calories, so just hypothetically. That's not a singular number. It's more of a range, because for some people to gain weight, they require upwards of 500 to 1,000 calories above that maintenance level due to the adaptation of non-exercise activity thermogenesis. You start moving more, you start burning more as a result. So some people require a greater caloric surplus in order to gain weight. I hope that makes sense. Jeff, you're on the other side of the camera. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I just want to make that point very clear, because some people find it easier to gain weight, and that's the explanation for it. It's not the magic metabolism. It's not the tapeworm in your gut eating up all the calories. Some people with as little as 200 calories over maintenance, from where maintenance being what they usually burn, they don't have as much of an adaptation, so they can gain weight a little easier and faster. Whereas somebody who starts to move more and fidget more might need an extra 1,000 calories a day to have significant weight gain. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. There's more resistance to weight loss than there is to weight gain. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Our ancestors didn't have the convenience that we have of readily available food all the time and things like that. So the body has the ability to become more efficient as we take in less calories, and metabolic rate can slow down a little bit as a result of taking in less calories, because, hey, you're not going to move around as much, some of that being subconscious and things like that. Whereas Gaining weight, there is some resistance, as I just covered, but it's not as much. It's disproportionate. Gaining weight would mean you're a really good hunter and you're getting a lot of food and stuff like that. Obviously at some point you'd get fat and you'd become slow, and as we all know, speed kills. So if you get too slow, you're not going to be a very good hunter. But point being is there's more resistance to weight loss than weight gain. That's why sometimes as people get leaner and leaner and you get closer to your goal body weight, it gets harder to lose that last bit of body fat. It becomes stubborn because your body's holding on to it. And there's some difference in the receptors in there and things like that. But that's a different video for a different day. And one we'll actually cover in the future, comparing different types of diets and which are more effective for that. But I just want to drive that point home. Like I said, maintenance is a range rather than a singular value, and it's variable. It moves based on other factors. Caloric intake, exercise activity, things like that. Set point and resistance to weight loss. So I already covered the resistance to weight loss that tends to happen. Now let me just make clear. If you take in less calories than you burn, you're still going to lose weight. You just won't lose it based on some singular number where, hey, I'm going to lose this much weight all the time because everything else is constant. Everything else isn't constant. It changes based upon those other variables. But believe you me, if you take in less calories than you burn, you will lose weight. And if you take in more calories than you burn over time, you're going to gain weight. There's people out there that say, oh, you can eat as much fat and protein as you want, you won't gain weight. Bullshit. That's nonsense. Okay? Remember, thermodynamics, that energy, it's either being burned or stored. My point is there's an explanation for it. It's not the magic metabolism, okay? At some point, if you take in more than you're burning beyond these adaptations, you're going to gain, and vice versa, okay? So back to set point. So sometimes we talk about somebody who is 200 pounds. Or let's just say, for me, I'm 180 pounds. Jeff on the other side of the camera. Jeff, you're what, about 210?
Hell no.
How much you weigh?
190.
190. Oh shit. Okay, he lost weight. I apologize. I'm really not messing. Jeff's a pretty big guy. If he throws his biceps in front of the camera, you'll see. So Jeff's 190 right now. Jeff comes down. He loses weight and he comes down to 180 to be the same weight as me. Jeff's metabolic rate as a whole is going to be lower than mine because of that resistance we talked about. There's going to be some adjustments his body's going to make. There's going to be a little bit of resistance. I've been 180. That's my set point. I'm there. I don't have to deal with that resistance. My non-exercise activity thermogenesis is not going to change much. Jeff's TEF is going to lower, but let's assume he's taking in the same amount of calories as I am once he gets there. There's going to be a little bit of a difference there, again, because of that resistance, and that difference is usually going to be in this non-exercise activity thermogenesis, because if our body composition and stuff is the same, our RMRs aren't going to differ that much, all things being equal. But again, there's going to be some efficiency, and we don't know exactly what that is, with all the organs and stuff like that going on. There's some variables there that are, we're still trying to figure out. But by and large, my metabolic rate is going to be a little bit higher than Jeff's. Not huge, but a little bit higher, until Jeff kind of reaches that set point. And there's a lot of interesting research on that, and again, that could be a whole other video. But I drew this too, by the way. I just remembered why I drew these. So these are those two little buckets. Now, let's just say you're me, and I'm my 2,000 calories, let's just say, is my maintenance. And all of a sudden, I start taking in 500 calories. Well, normally, those 500 calories would spill out of the bucket, okay? And I would store them as body fat. That's it, storing as body fat. But because I'm one of those people that has this high level of non-exercise activity thermogenesis, my bucket probably gets bigger. My maintenance calories probably get bigger. Hence, I don't gain weight as easily. Whereas somebody else might keep their bucket about the same size or just have a little bit bigger of a bucket, but they're still going to store some of that extra, okay? Some of those extra calories, okay? So that's another illustration, hopefully, that drives home that point in differences. All right, so weight and body composition. So we're talking about body composition and how it matters. And I covered this in the one video, is can you get lean and gain muscle at the same time? And I talked about how starting point matters, because I think people tend to confuse weight loss and weight gain with muscle gain and muscle loss. That's an important point, because starting point matters. So if you're somebody who was, far overweight, you've not trained, you've not, you've not lifted or exercised at all, well, yeah, you can put on some muscle, assuming you're taking in enough protein to facilitate growth, enough fat to keep your endocrine system cranking, you're on a mild caloric deficit, you're going to lose body fat and you're probably going to build muscle. So that's not a one-size-fits-all answer. So 1 pound of fat burns about 10 calories at rest. 1 pound of muscle burns about 30 calories at rest. So muscle burns about 3 times more calories than fat at rest. So if 2 individuals are 200 pounds and one guy's got more muscle than the other, well, there's going to be a higher BMR, not that much, but a little bit higher in the guy that has more muscle. But usually what happens when somebody is heavier is they're a lot heavier. We're talking about somebody who's obese per se. So that really is going to become a non-factor because they're going to have so much excess body fat that their metabolic rate, it's going to cost more for them to do certain activities, just walking down the street and things like that. So that's what I mean, like being cursed with a slow metabolism, coming back around to that. If you're really heavy, you're not as efficient at doing things like walking down the street or going up the stairs. You actually burn more calories. So the bottom line is that's what I mean by you're not cursed by this slow metabolism. Bigger bodies cost more. Think about it as like a gas-guzzling SUV versus a little smart car, one of those little box that I don't know people drive. One of those that as the extreme examples. They're the ones more fuel efficient. Well, it's smaller. It weighs less. It doesn't require as much gas to move versus the SUV, which requires more. It's got a bigger engine. Okay, so that's another way to think of it. Now, other factors for people who think they have these slower metabolisms I want to cover is number one is that your appetite is not the same as your metabolism, and there's a lot of key roles, things that play a key role in appetite. Leptin. Your sensitivity to it, that's a hormone that's produced by fat cells that tells you whether or not you're full. If you're not as sensitive to it, you don't get the message as quickly, or you're just not as sensitive to it. So you may have a bigger appetite as a result. Now, something that may affect this is gut flora, and there's more research being done on this. Nobody could say definitively it's this or that, but it seems more and more gut flora plays a real key role. Those are the microbes that live in your gut. In obesity, there's a lot of that research going on. So hopefully over time we can figure out what that is and take care of it. But right now we can't control that. So we don't want to go too far into that. You can control it insofar as what you eat, how much you eat, and your activity level. I think you'll get some turnover on that. But that research is for the most part still in its infancy. There's been a lot done on it, but there's certainly nothing definitive. So what you do control is what you eat. So what I mean by that is eat nutrient-dense foods, especially if you're on lower calories because you have less to play with. That's where what you eat matters. So, I'm talking lean meats, fish, fruits, vegetables. If you're somebody that has the caloric room to eat other stuff, like treats, snacks, things like that, that's fine. There's no reason to demonize sugar or things like that. If you have the caloric room or those are your goals, that's okay. That's fine. So there's a lot of that goes on that people need to keep in mind. So what you eat matters. Eat all that stuff. Like I said, lean meats, fruit, vegetables, healthy grains, things like that. Okay? And again, if you got some room for some candy and stuff like that, well, hey, have at it. If you're dieting, you probably don't because your macros are probably set where you don't have a lot of room to be popping a bunch of sugar and carbs and things like that in, okay? But sugar's not evil. If you eat 10 grams of carbohydrates from gummy bears or 10 grams of carbohydrates from a tiny apple or something like that, less the fiber, okay, the other calories are there, let's just say, it's going to be the same in terms of energy. Now, you can argue that it's easier to eat more of the gummy bears without batting an eye than it is the apples. That would be true, and that's a whole different argument. But saying that, they're just completely different on an equal amount of energy coming out of them, that's not true. They vary in nutrient density in terms of micronutrients, vitamins, and things like that. But again, it's still the energy, so we're talking about the energy aspect of it here. You also control how much you eat. So, don't eat too much if you're trying to lose weight. You control that. Now, I know I mentioned when you get the message that you're full and stuff like that. Well, that's why using something like MyFitnessPal and having a goal of your carbohydrates, fat, and protein set. I covered in our video how to get lean and rip fast. We could thank Jeff for that title because he put fast in there because he thought more people would find it on search. I get to hear about that all the time. But I covered, some ways to start calculating that and figure out how much you need. And then the adjustments. Again, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. So you control how much you eat. And again, how much you eat plays a role in what you eat, so to speak. As I said, I gave that example. It's harder to eat, 5 apples as it is 5, let's just say we're giant gummy bears with the same amount of energy. You could eat the gummy bears, more of them, probably more easily before you got the message that you're full. When you eat, that's a joke. It doesn't really matter when you eat, unless we're talking about maybe before training. For instance, I'll give an extreme example. Going out and eating a huge burrito right before you go train, probably not the best idea. You're probably going to be burping it up. It's probably going to hinder your performance. Not really a good idea. But the notion that, hey, I have to eat every X amount of hours, that's not true. Now, generally, the bigger the person is and the more calories they're taking in, they're probably just going to end up eating more meals because, they don't want to get an upset gut because they're taking in so many more calories. But let's just say you're a small female who's, you're taking in 1,500 calories and somebody's telling you to eat 6 times a day. I mean, they're like little, little Barbie oven out and have little snacks. That's not enough. So when you eat matters in terms of convenience and how it affects your performance in the gym and stuff like that. And if it helps you eating more frequently from overeating, do it, fine. But don't think that there's some steadfast rule that there's some metabolic fire that's going to be lit by you eating every X amount of hours. It's just not true. And that's been done by a lot of people who do the intermittent fasting and stuff like that. It's done a good job of help breaking up that myth because there's people who do that, especially those on lower calories, because you get the satisfaction of larger meals within a smaller window. So that's a whole different deal. And then how much you exercise. That's also something in your control. This is in your control, how much of this activity you do. And to some degree, non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, is in your control. Insofar as, let's just say you have a desk job, well, maybe you could stand up at your desk. You can put boxes up there or something like that. Maybe you do like a couple hours a day of standing or things like that. You're home, you make more of an effort to do more yard work, things like that. Some of that stuff is in your control. So do those things. If that's what you're trying to do in terms of burning more calories, assuming your goal is to lose weight. Those of you trying to gain weight, you probably, if you're having trouble, you got to calculate something like MyFitnessPal, how much you're actually taking in. Figure it out. I'll get messages sometimes. John, I'm 130 pounds. I take in 6,000 calories a day, and I can't gain weight. You're not taking in 6,000 calories a day unless there's a tapeworm in you or you're running marathons on a daily basis. It's not happening. You're not taking in 6,000 calories. I guarantee you're not taking that much. So try and calculate it on something like MyFitnessPal. It's really easy. It takes like 5 minutes a day for you to do it. And be honest. And be honest with yourself on both sides. You're not hurting me by telling me, I'm doing this and it's not working. No, you're hurting yourself because you're not going to reach your goals because you're not being honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself, okay, when it comes to that. Boy, let me see here. We've covered a lot of stuff here. I've got some notes here. And by the way, the research for this video, I'm going to post it in the comment section underneath some of the studies. There's a really nice review by a gentleman from the on non-exercise activity thermogenesis from the Mayo Clinic. I'm going to post that below. He does a really good job of explaining this, and he uses a bank account example for people. This is your mortgage. This is how much groceries you're buying. Excess income is like your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Things. I forgot the exact whole thing, but by and large, he explains it really well in there. So if somebody needs another way to think of it, he does a good job of that. So I'll link that below with some other relevant studies as well. If you guys like this kind of a video, happy to do more in the future. Somebody tipped me off to this a few months ago. There's a gentleman that does a really nice research review. It's only $10 a month. I've read through a lot of them actually, and they're really good. His name is Alan Aragon. It's $10 per month. He doesn't even know I'm doing this. I'm not trying to plug something for somebody. I don't know the person. I don't know the man. So, but it's really, really interesting. He does a good job of taking studies and breaking them down for those of you interested. So they're usually a really, really good read. I'll put a link in the bottom. I should probably send him an email, let him know if he cares if we do that. I'm sure he won't. But that's for those of you guys that are interested in this. Again, we'll do more videos like this in the future. I hope I covered everything here in depth. I hope I answered the questions, kind of cleared up the myth on whether or not you have a fast or slow metabolism or you're cursed. Hopefully I convinced you that you are in control. You can do a lot about it, and you can take control of these factors and set a goal and do it and reach it. And anything we can do to help you out, let us know. Again, post those questions. Also, check us out at facebook.com/bestpricenutrition. I appreciate you watching. Thank you.